human rights, right? But then also, I just hope like we don't like we frame it from a very regional list perspective, like bottom up, and we don't try to compare ourselves from the West, because their understanding and their experience of democracy is also different from us. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be how other regions are, right? So yeah, that's just a quick comment on what you said. Okay, now so somebody sent, also two people sent messages. My
Okay.
expectation is how to become a better youth activist, since I always wanted to raise my voice regarding what's happening. However, I don't know. I'm also afraid someone will bash me. Okay, so that's quite similar to you, how to be a better youth activist. Okay, from League of Filipino Students, I joined this session because I'd like to learn more about table battles and negotiations, which will be helpful whenever we are demanding and negotiating with authorities, especially when we launch mass campaigns and stage protest actions.
Okay.
So John Emile mentioned two types of interactions with stakeholders. One is negotiation tables, and the other is stage protests. So those are very different things, two different things, and there are two strategies. In fact, a multitude of strategies, but two clusters when you do stage protests, because your objective is quite different. I would like to believe that the objective there is more to claim your space, right? To claim your voice, to have a collective consciousness, versus negotiation tables where you actually sit with different parties and you sit with the opposing side and you try to come up, and the objective is to come up with a concrete output, right? So those two are different, and we're going to try to tackle both. I would be tackling more about the negotiation table, and then Ashish, who is actually doc online, like he's in the main room, but he can't change his name. So how do we move him to this, I don't know, breakout group? I don't know how. Can we tell Fatima, please? So Ashish will be more the activist mass protest expert. Okay, and then Daryl I learned about the census score. So okay, so everybody seems to have similar sentiments. How about our other friend? Has this?
Is your connection bad? So, okay. So anyone want to introduce yourself first? So I think we can begin soon. Anyone want to say how you expect and
Sorry.
yeah, you lost the connection.
Yeah, but I'm back. Don't worry, I'm with you.
Okay.
Have we found that she's in the main room?
I see it's the main room. I'm trying to connecting in the technique team.
So maybe I'll start by like my own expectations, or my own I guess my own expectations from this discussion, because often I really don't teach. I'm not a teacher, so I won't like tell you what to do, but I'll be able to facilitate a discussion on, so that we can exchange our ideas, right? Based on at least the frameworks that I've already been using.
Lovely. Yes.
For me, because of my background, like I've like after I graduated from college, I worked on some projects with the Asean Secretariat. So I started as a young volunteer and advocate. So I was backpacking actually around some Southeast Asian countries, so Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and then I did see Cambodia and Vietnam, so and Indonesia. So I volunteered for some grassroots organizations, and we built this movement. This was like 10 years ago, so maybe you don't know about it. It was the ASEAN Youth Volunteers Network, And then we gained traction because of our membership. So it was really about social work. It wasn't too political, but it was more about, and of course, but you know, social work is connected to politics, because after all, we're talking about development, right? So we gained traction, and then eventually CAYC, which is the Committee for ASEAN Youth Cooperation, it's the only youth entity mandated by the ASEAN Charter. So it brings together the National Youth Council. So somehow it's semi-government. They noticed us and they adopted us. So now I'm the CAYC volunteers head. And despite the committee being semi-government, I'm tasked to coordinate with with youth-led networks. So that's why I've started working with Fatima, ASEAN Youth Forum, and then also with Sinjaya, ASEAN Youth Organization. And there have been many across like the past 10 years, actually. ASEAN Youth are very active, and I'm proud of our generation for being active. But of course, you know, there's always that tension, because I got used to that at a young age. I was, even before, okay, now like my timeline is messed up. So I should have started when I was in the Philippines. I was a member of the Sangguniang Kabataan, so it's the local youth council. So I was an elected government official in my locality, and then I was in the student government in high school and college, and then with the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines. So, and then I was with the ASEAN Youth Councils. And then when I left the region, I went to New York, and I worked for some UN agencies. So again, institutions, multilateral institutions. And one of my main projects was with the World Urban Youth Councils Network. So again, I worked with youth councils. So my point is that I've been, also it's also just because of circumstance that my work has been always with institutions. So I'm more used to being on the negotiation table, trying to look at a win-win solution for both parties. So I'm the middle person, but of course my heart is with the communities, right? Because that's what I studied, and that's really my intention why I'm in this field to begin with. Ashish is more the activist. So that's why I really wanted him to be here, because it would be nice for both of us to have a conversation on how first we stay true to our ideals as activists, but then at the same time, when we go to the table, we're able to present ourselves so that we will have even gradually concrete outputs, you know, because sometimes it takes that, like it takes a generation, a decade to create concrete, impactful change, right? But then while doing that, of course, we have to be surrounded by a community. We have to be part of a community so that we don't, of like-minded people, so that we don't lose track of what our original principles really are. You know, because sometimes when you keep on going to negotiation tables and engaging with governments, there's a danger to lose sight of what you're really fighting for. So that's always a tension. It's like an internal conflict that I also always have to solve. Okay, basically I already talked for 10 minutes. That was just expectation setting. Let me just read, she's here not yet, so let me just read the comments. Learn more about empowering the self. Okay, that's very true that it starts with empowering the self, because when you first it's important to gain confidence as an activist, of course, right? Because then you'll have to be able to basically we are, how do they call that, we are outcasts in the society, in a sense, you know, because this is not the easy path, right? So we'll need to have really a strong foundation. But at the same time, also, when we negotiate and talk to different stakeholders, the soft side of it is you'll also be able to understand other people's narratives more if you know yourself more, you know, so that there's not, like many times people who are in the extreme end, left or right, come from a place of fear. I mean, when I'm talking about extreme, like you know, like extreme left and extreme right. So many times people, and I'm not saying all, but many times when people extreme right, it comes from a place of fear and insecurity. So if as a peace builder or negotiator, you haven't quite cleared that out of your own system, then you will just keep on clashing insecurities with each other. you know, like fear versus fear versus fear. So people fight fire with fire, and um, they just try to defend and become like, it's not even defend, but it's become when you're when you're trying to, yeah, basically be self-defensive, and you know, like if you don't, you have to be able to, and I'll go through the exercise later, but you have to be able to know what your personal triggers are and your personal weaknesses are, so that when other people, especially if you've found your niche, like for instance, my niche is peace, so I deal with more or less the same actors who also deal with peace, and they already know me as a personality, and I also know them. And sometimes, you know, I will have some competitors or enemies from the other camp who doesn't really believe in what I'm standing for, right? So in the dirty game, actually, of politics, they can use your insecurities and weaknesses against you. So why am I saying this? I'm scaring you. But basically, self-awareness. It's not scary, because really the simple answer to that is self-awareness, and having a community like maybe AYF. At least as I know, for the past few decades, it's been led by my friends, and um, it's quite a grounded. The founders are very grounded people. Okay. Think of the mountain only. Okay. So I think we've read everybody.
Actually,
How's
I'm
Ashish
here.
doing?
Sorry, I've been
Still in the
signed
main
in.
room. Oh, Ashish, are you
I'm
here?
just signed. No, yeah. I've been here the whole time, but I'm signed in as your
But how
name
come
for
I
some
can hear
reason.
you,
So
but I don't see
maybe
you?
that's why you may think I'm not here.
Yeah, can you? Yeah, I can. So you don't need
Why
to
are you
change
seeing
your
your
name.
camera?
Just turn on your webcam or camera so I can see your face. Make sure that you're here, so you can say hi to participant. Oh, you're on the taxi. So yeah, once again, I want to
Okay,
affirm this is
Ashish.
Mr. Asis Hula, our second facilitator today. And yep, I think we have enough participants here, and we can begin our
Hopefully.
workshop today. Yep,
Okay.
shall we begin?
Ashish, maybe you can start. I'll start with your slides. I'll share your slides so that your battery doesn't die on us. Shall
Sure,
we do
sure.
that?
Yeah, I'm in the car now. I'm in the car I'm in the car home
Your
from the airport.
hair.
I'm
Can you
charging my.
fix your hair? Okay.
Yeah,
Fix
it's
your hair,
I'm just
man. Sorry, you know, Ashish, we're very grateful for Ashish because he just arrived at the airport. So he came out of the immigration and called into the workshop right away. So
yeah,
Ashish will
yeah.
be presenting slides from the advocacy kind of like pillar of the UN Major Group for Children and Youth. So this is something that more or less you guys are already doing because it's advocacy. So later, after that, that's when we'll talk about negotiation skills. Okay, Ashish, can you see my screen? I mean, I'll just
Uh,
move the slides as we
okay,
talk.
I can see your screen. Okay, I'll introduce myself briefly and then I'll get to the slides. I guess. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yep, yeah, you can introduce yourself briefly because I already
Sure.
introduced you, yeah, to everyone.
Oh,
So
okay, okay. Sorry. I didn't realize. All right, guys. It's great to be here. Very happy to be part of this workshop. My name is Ashish. I'm originally from New Delhi, where I have just arrived. From Boston, I had to leave, and it was a 4-hour-long process in the airport to get out of immigration and to get out of institutional quarantine, so I could be able to go home. And I do research in environmental and economic policy, but my background in this context is I'm a board member in the major group, which is a formal engagement mechanism for young people in the UN, and I have a
sorry
background
for
in.
interrupting, but your sound is quite noise. There are many noise. You can take your micro next to your mouth so it can be better. The sound can be better, I think.
Okay,
Turn your
sure,
video
sure.
off. We've already seen your face. You can turn your
Okay,
video off.
okay, okay. I'm turning my video off. Okay. All
Okay,
right.
good.
Okay. So my background is in advocacy and activism in the multilateral system, mostly the UN. So and in that context, we have certain modules on advocacy. Hey guys, sorry, my my mother was calling, so my phone got paused. So the module that I'll be presenting is something we use for basic advocacy at the UN. So yeah, happy to share that with
हाँ जी
you.
मुंसब जी कार में है
Okay. All
हाँ
right.
good.
Okay.
ये तो ऐसे लग रहा है जैसे जंगल में से आए
Okay, so we start by saying,
इतने बड़े बड़े
in
बाल हो रहे
general,
हैं
having a discussion with people
बड़ी
about
बुरी हाल
what is advocacy, because a lot of people have very different views
बहुत पतले
on
पतले
this
हो रहे
topic based on
Ashish,
where they're doing their advocacy.
that your background
हैं
noise?
भी लगे हैं ऐसे में आज
I mean, there could be background noise. I'm in the car. So, okay.
Well, it's
Is
louder
this
than
better?
you.
Is
Yeah.
this better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we normally start off the discussion with what advocacy means to a lot of people, and based on where people do most of their advocacy, we hear very interesting definitions or experiences of what people term as advocacy. So,
Yeah, your slides are
simply,
here. What is advocacy?
okay. No, so that's what I was saying. So, based on the audience that you asked, people have a very different answer. What you see on the slide here was our attempt at bridging the gap between all the different answers that we hear about what advocacy means to different people. So, again, it might mean something else to you, but this is just a generic, middle of the road definition of advocacy. Depending on how much time we have, of course, we can have a discussion on what it means to you and how you see it, and then how the different participants see it, and then we can try to come up with our own definition as well. But if we have a general sense, we can move to the next slide. I mean, it depends on what the room wants to talk about. Okay,
You do
so
advocacy.
where do we do advocacy? So this is something I had touched upon in the previous slide. Coming from the multilateral perspective, we try to see, we also try to see advocacy in the lens of where that advocacy is taking place. So a lot of us do topic-based advocacy, advocacy on a particular topic. You know, that topic, like Regine mentioned, could be peace and security. For some people, that topic is gender equality. For some people, that topic is political participation of young people, and so on and so forth. Then we try to look at it as where is it that we're doing this advocacy? Are we local actors doing local advocacy? Are we national actors doing national advocacy? Are we regional actors doing regional activist advocacy? Or are we global actors doing global advocacy? Now, this, of course, you could be a local actor doing global advocacy. You could be a regional actor doing global advocacy as well. These are just the different levels and scopes at which the activity can take place, but they're all not mutually exclusive. And you could be one and engaging in the other, or you could be one and engaging in several of these. The other way we try to look at advocacy, especially in the context of policy making, is at what stage of the cycle we're doing our advocacy in. So a lot of us, at least in the multilateral space, end up doing most of our advocacy in the policy design phase, where frameworks and policies are being developed and designed. A significant portion of the implementation cycle of policy and of change actually takes place after the policy design phase. And we often see that the number of actors doing advocacy beyond that stage keeps on systematically reducing as we move further away from the design phase. Now, there can be a multiple number of reasons for this, and sometimes these reasons are just how the space is structured. Sometimes these reasons are also based on how much space is available for actors to engage with states and engage with authorities as we move into different phases policy cycle. But it's good to at least have the cycle mapped out in our heads. You know, so policy design, when the policy is being made, implementation, when the state or a group of stakeholders is actually supposed to implement the policy. Then we look at how the policy is being monitored. And then sometimes people write monitoring and accountability as the same stage, but sometimes you also classify it as two different stages, because monitoring is supposed to be a technical exercise and accountability is supposed to be a political exercise. So the third party is doing monitoring, and then actors that are supposed to be beneficiaries of the policy are holding the implementers accountable. All right, so if that was not too boring, okay. So one point that I missed was we can combine all of these. So we can combine location, and we can combine stage, and we can combine topic, and see what works best for our own contexts. All right. So how do we start? So I mean, if you look at these slides, what do we do in the policy design space? Again, coming from the lens of the multilateral system, where the processes and spaces themselves can be very complex and complicated, sometimes by design, to confuse stakeholders and to make it harder for people to engage in the process. So the first step that we talk about and we introduce in any capacity building exercises to actually understand the process where we want to do advocacy. So, for example, Regine mentioned peace and security. So, how is peace and security spoken about in different multilateral spaces? In this case, the UN, for example. So, how peace is spoken about at the UN, the institutional architecture around it, is absolutely different from the institutional architecture on peace and security, for example, in Asean, or for peace and security in Europe, or for peace and security in South America. The same is also true for different topics within the same institution as well. I'm just looking at the messages. Okay.
Oh, no, it's not.
All right. Okay. No problem. Okay. So now you see the point here. This is called decide your HAS priorities. So HAS is just the name of an event where we last did this presentation. So sometimes, yeah, I mean, so we know when the presentation was last given. So yeah, I mean, so HAS stands for Humanitarian Affairs Segment. It's the avenue in the UN where policy for humanitarian affairs is discussed. So in your own context, this matches to you in the sense that determine your priorities for the particular topic and the particular process that you're engaging in. Now, this will be different if you're working on gender equality, it will be different if you're working on peace and security, it will be different if you're working on climate change, for example. So understand the process, determine what your priorities are, and then we are able to identify the avenues within the processes where we can have most amount of influence. Because at times your priorities will have a greater say in which stage of the process or what point of the process you can be most influential in. So, again, that's part of understanding the architecture within which you're doing within which you're seeking to do your advocacy. So the next stage is where we start engaging with other stakeholders and other actors within our space / avenue / loose coalitions, our partners, and so on and so forth. So we understand the process, we identify our priorities, we identify the most influential points in the process to advocate for our priorities. Then we seek to work with other stakeholders within the same process to be able to amplify each other's views. Now, some people say that based on which stakeholders you have a better relationship with, your point of influence in the process may be different, but then that strategy is based less on the topic that we want to influence and more on just the act of influencing. So we always ask people to determine their priorities first.
Sorry for
Yeah,
interrupt
and
you.
then
So
we come to
sorry, Asean.
developing.
Sorry, Asean.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you, but I think you can make it faster or wrap it up so we can save time for
Okay,
Regine,
sure, sure.
and we have Q&A session also so people can ask some questions.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, no problem. Okay, so I'm done with this. Understanding the process, determine your priorities, identify the point of influence, work with other stakeholders, and then develop your plan. Okay, so I'm done with this. I think we can move to the next slide, or we can even save that for. All right. Okay. So then it's about if you're working on implementation, you take the framework and seek to implement it in your communities in a way that is most relevant to your communities. And then for monitoring and accountability as well, again, I already mentioned this above. Monitoring is the process of actually assessing the success of what is meant to be implemented, and then accountability is to hold the people who are supposed to implement it to account. All right, I think we can move to the next one, and we can even maybe move to Regine
Well, I don't know if you want to go over where are we, but this is kind of too detailed, right? I wonder which of the tools would be interesting for them, like maybe advocacy planning. Well, these are outdated anyway, but the advocacy planning tool might be interesting. You can close here if you want.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so if you look at this, ignore the content that's in there because that's very specific to the UN and a particular topic. But this tool relates back to 2 slides before this as to what is our checklist and what are the stages that we seek to influence, and then how we seek to make that. Yeah. No, before this.
This one?
Okay. So now after this, sorry, I'm looking for below. After the one with the tool, I think
So this is advocacy planning.
okay. So now this is about actually planning our advocacy strategy on a particular topic, which I don't think we need to do. But if you just go to the last slide, Regine, which summarizes
Oh,
this.
there. Yeah, that's a recap. Go for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then these can be plotted with the tool for us to assert where we are and how we need to proceed. Yeah, that's
And I think it's like
yeah. So we can go to you and then
go ahead.
no, that's it. I said we could move to you and then we could take questions in
Right.
the Q&A.
No, I just wanted to point out from your discussion, and you're also welcome to point things out during my discussion, that like what the paradigm of where you're doing advocacy, like Rashid's presentation was of course it applies to different levels, but he works really more on the global level. So it also shifts like from global to regional to national, depending on, of course, we all know culture, right? Like where you're really at. Like if you're in New York versus if you're in Jakarta, you'll be dealing with people very differently. But then also just the frameworks you use, because the higher you go, the more universal the language becomes. So it's almost and then of course the lower levels you go, the more contextualized they are. So just be wary of like those different, you kind of have to like have different avatars of yourself when you go from global to regional to national. Is that a good point, something to point out, Ashish? Oh, I don't know if he's there. So
I wasn't. Yes.
So that's
yes,
for
absolutely.
advocacy. Do you want to add something?
No. I mean, no. nothing particular to what you added up. Know your context and know the framework.
So that's for advocacy. And oftentimes, when for the negotiation part, actually both of us took our masters in conflict resolution, but I ended up doing really more like practice when it comes to peace, and he's more of a researcher, and his practice is more in with climate. So this module is something that I personally used when I took the program on negotiation. But it'll be interesting to know Ashish's thoughts as well. So in the field of negotiation, and especially mediation, because negotiation, you're representing a side, right? And you're negotiating your side. But still, you're kind of like, as a negotiator, you're still kind of in the in-between, because you're gonna be sitting at the negotiation table. Whereas a mediator is completely somebody who's in the middle, right? And tries to listen maybe to two negotiators or like two camps of a conflict. So this whole field really of negotiation and mediation, it tries to, later you'll see it in the slide, to like bridge the worlds of advocacy, like when you're trying to really fight for a point, right? And also the field of, say, there's really no name for it, but I would maybe refer to consultation, like when you do an opinionless consultation, asking questions, data gathering of all sides, which is usually what governments are supposed to do at the beginning, right? To gather data, listen to all citizens, no matter what political party. So that's more like politically neutral. So as a negotiator, mediator, you kind of have to be to know what your side is, but then also at the same time, not be too advocative in a sense that you're also able to listen to the other side, right? So that's been what I've mentioned in my personal experience in this slide, like that tension that usually negotiators have. Okay, so okay, let's just move on. But then, so when we talk about negotiation, oftentimes it's really about, well, apart from that personal conflict that you have to deal with, it's also about the conversation. Many times we get to a deal because of how the conversation came about, you know? Sometimes you go into a negotiation table with people with very opposing sides, and outside it, like for instance, in the media, you'll see, you know, so why don't we choose like a particular issue that we want to talk about, so that I don't keep on talking in general terms. Like, can you suggest like a situation that we can talk about during this presentation? So let me know if you have. But I don't know what's a good example. Okay, let's just cite from the Philippines, right? We have the quite successful, at least on the onset, Bangsamoro peace process, right? But for centuries, the struggle for self-determination of the Moro people, it's gone on for centuries. And then, so from an outsider point of view, it's as if the government and a struggle for self-determination are two sides that could never be the same, right? Like they could never, because one wants to have self-determination, and the other wants at least before completely the opposite. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes it's not about the positions, but it's about, well, first, I'm going to explain a little bit more about how the interests behind the positions, but really it's about what happens on the table. So the conversation. Sometimes, like, because of how the conversation has been structured, the interests behind the positions shift. So, and that's when we're able to actually get to a deal where we realize that, oh, actually, like the two sides are not completely opposite each other, because they have shared interests, like maybe development, social development for both from both the government and also the opposing party, maybe human rights, protection of human rights. That after all, the position is not so much. I mean, I can't speak for them, but this is just, let's say, a hypothetical case study, because we don't have any case study right now. it's not so much about gaining independence, but it was about maybe like a people-led, region-led control of resources. So for instance, that's why there's an autonomous government. There's a Bangsamoro parliament. That after all, it wasn't so much that after all, it was possible to negotiate a deal that didn't have to that wasn't based on the original positions of the two opposing parties, you know, because by looking at the interests behind the positions, they were able to structure conversations that led to middle grounds. Okay, you'll understand me more as I go on. So the structure of difficult conversations will have to be able to distinguish what are the facts, what are the feelings, and what are the identities involved. So with the facts, often there are more than two sides to the story, because really, like, one side has different set of facts from the other. Like, everybody thinks they're right. Like, nobody really fights for something that they think is wrong, right? So looking at facts isn't enough. We also have to look at feelings, because many times, you know, conflicts are driven by or circumvented by emotions. And then third, identity, and that's where, as I mentioned a while ago, cultures come in. Sometimes you, for instance, if you negotiate with like, I don't want to be racist, but like a strict poker face kind of culture, sometimes they say things that you think isn't really that doesn't look sincere, but then that's just really the way they talk, you know. Okay, so managing the facts. So these are the three important shifts that I hope you forget everything I said, but like we focus on this slide. It's something that I always try to emphasize when I speak about negotiation. The first shift is from certainty to curiosity. This will like one of the shifts that will be in more conflict with activists and advocates, because for the most part we are sure, when we are certain what human rights are, right? But just for the sake of maybe we can say now, for the sake of conversation and for the sake of trying to be able to strike an initial deal, try to explore the possibility of being more curious, because in the end maybe you'll also learn something new from the other side, or if not, and in the end you stick by, first say we have, okay, in our last webinar we had Islamists, like people from Islamic parties and in ASEAN, and also at the same time we had LGBTQI activists. So I think it will take ages before these two have a middle ground, right? But there's value in just the exercise of being curious and trying to find out, to begin with, where do the Islamists come from? Why do they have such positions? And slowly, if you don't even learn from them, at least you'll be able to understand what is valuable for them. Okay, so that also answers one of the questions about being defensive. Right, defense mechanisms, because that's human nature, really. Like, when you try to make people feel like they don't know what they're talking about, or that they're ill-intended, all the more they will be defensive. And by my experience, actually, for the most part, people just really want to be heard, you know, even the extremists, even those who oppose us. Everybody wants to have a space in this world. So if you make people, it's also, I hope it becomes a sincere strategy, right? But it's just a strategy in itself to make people feel like they're heard, which is what all our minorities and underprivileged communities want, right? And goes the same actually for the other side. The next shift is from blame to joint contribution. Again, this is like a little bit of a delicate space, like, because of course we have to hold our governments accountable and we have to hold people in position accountable. But one proactive way to do that is to be part of the solution and to contribute jointly, to have concrete alternatives, right? Rather than, of course, it's important to point out what's wrong in the system, like say, of course, corruption, and then what are often wrong in systems. Say lack of transparency and accountability, but then what? Like, because maybe after all, bureaucrats, people who work in the government, had they known a better alternative, they would have done it to begin with, right? Unless they really are diabolical, and there are diabolical, like really evil people out there, but very few actually. In my experience, many people just either don't know, or like they're exposed to a community that did not show them an alternative, So, but then again, we have to give people benefit of doubt, but at the same time, like try to be to put our foot on the ground when we need to. Anyways, the point here is really joint contribution. Like, make sure you propose something whenever you oppose. So propose when you oppose, and be part of the solution. Like, if there is something that's positive coming out of a dialogue, some things are improving, then take notice also of the improvements, not just of the flaws of the system, and constantly be part of the solution. Because then this will turn against you. Like, whenever we as activists try to criticize the system, and us ourselves don't contribute to it, that's often the narrative against activists, where it's all talk, but then really, like, we're not part of the solution. So do not give them that room to invalidate your ideas by ensuring that advocacy comes with action. That's why in MGCY they have youth action, and they also have advocacy policy, and they have to go hand in hand. The third shift is shift from bad intentions to impacts. This one is a little bit easier because it's obvious. Like, we never really know what people's intentions are. I mean, just as much as you don't really know what I don't really know what your intentions are, right? Even if it seems so obvious, and maybe at times we know because we see the pattern of, say, just a corrupt politician year after year, when, let's say, in country X, and then we don't have transparency of financial statements, and of course, like, mismanagement of the budget. Like, there are patterns of behavior that we can observe. But this also relates to the whole defensiveness bit. Like, the more you attack people's intentions, the more they will become defensive. So what you can absolutely be sure about is the impact. So one can really absolutely describe what the impact of a policy is on a community, versus personalizing the issue on what, say, a politician, or like I don't know, someone who works for the government really is as a person, So, like, say, instead of saying, oh, she's I don't know, you know what I'm trying to say. So I guess the main point is that don't go first, try less to focus on individuals, and of course absolutely going personal, but focus on impact, because it is also something that's measurable, and you can prove it. You can prove it by being evidence-based, but people's intentions, you can never prove it substantively. Oh wait, what? 5 minutes? Oh, okay. Wow. So yeah. So we're never really gonna, in negotiation tables, we're never gonna go anywhere with the "I'm right, no, you're not" framing. So that's why we have to go through those shifts. And this is what I was telling you earlier. The two of the most powerful and effective human fears are the fear of failure and the fear of success. So we have to address that fear internally, so that then we don't get exposed when we negotiate and we advocate. But we also have to recognize that everybody, at the end of the day, we can humanize negotiation. Everybody at the end of the day also comes from a place of fear. If if a community, an institution still has some hope, then we address the fear of the people working in that institution. Other times, it's rightfully so. Extreme measures are necessary, of course. If there's too much oppression already, and it's taken a while to induce structural change. Well, actually, these are all like what do you call this? Like detailed explanations of the three shifts, but I think I already did that without even. Okay, so here, a while ago, I was talking about how negotiation is kind of in between advocacy and trying to push a stand versus, and then inquiry, which is just consultation, right? And like in gathering data in a politically neutral way. So somewhere in between, you have to try to find that balance. Okay, we've also talked about blame and then joint contribution. I should have gone through these slides while I was explaining. Anyways, but I spoke about that already. Okay, advocacy and inquiry. So really, it's an exercise of listening, listen actively, get beneath the surface, describe your data or your impact so that other people can also listen to you. Try to be wary if you're being judgmental or defensive, or you're, I don't know, if you're distracted, daydreaming, or you're trying to be self-righteous when you're trying to solve a problem. And these are all human, like everybody goes through these things. But like I mentioned at the beginning, if you're wary about your weaknesses and your triggers, you'll be able to be a more objective negotiator. And then culture and communication. So I'll just touch on this a little bit, how, because in ASEAN, we have 10 very, very distinctively diverse cultures. So if you're doing like international, like inter-country negotiation, just try to be wary of the 10 ways you can take a screenshot that culture affects negotiation. So sometimes there are cultures, basically this is like a spectrum of how cultures are, to the left, to the right. So that's how you interpret it. There are cultures that are more contract-based and very less personal. Rarely Asian cultures are like this. We're really more a relationship-based culture. There are the more advanced ones when it comes to negotiation, try to look for a win-win. Like what I was saying when I cited an example, like to look at shared interests versus trying to be too hard on certain positions. Then also look at informal, formal. I guess also Asian cultures really are more comfortable with informal approaches. We like to do bilaterals, like side meetings first before we all gather into like a formal meeting. Okay, time sensitive, I think we're quite low as Asians. So, and then emotionalism high. Communications rarely we're direct. We're not too direct. Maybe some countries like Singapore, their language is a little bit more direct, and some subcultures within countries. I'm sorry for like outlining Singapore, but that's the first thing that came out of my head. But usually ASEAN culture is very indirect. Like we try to, it's not necessarily bad, like to try to be more sensitive of cultural context and all, but it's just something that you need to strategize around, but not something to hold you down, you know. Okay, and I think, well, on consensus, obviously we all know that about ASEAN versus a more individualistic approach like in the West. And then, yeah, so I think that's about it for culture. We're done, right? Like we have to leave.
Yeah,
okay,
lovely.
So, yeah.
So I think we have two questions here, respectively. I will paste it in the chat box and I will repeat it. So the first question is about, it's from some Vietnamese participants. He asked that, how about some tips on how to negotiate when asking for sponsorship when you are in a non-profit organization advocating for social issue? So she wants some experience from you. Can you say?
How to negotiate when asking for sponsorship when your NGO. Ashish, Ashish, are you here? we're both.
Yes,
we're
I'm
both
here. I'm here. I'm here.
sponsorship.
I'm here. I'm here. Okay. Okay. No. So I guess this is a question we get quite a lot, and I think and I always answer it in the same way. Then I'm going to answer it now. I think this goes back to the different steps and stages that I had mentioned. You identify your priorities and identify who your partners for those priorities are. So essentially the key lies in being able to convince partners, and these partners may be private sector partners, maybe governments, maybe other NGOs, maybe other agencies, maybe regional blocks, that their priorities and views are aligned with your views and your mission, and how supporting you will actually support their own messaging as well. So that's the base feeling that you make others feel who have the ability to sponsor you, that your success will be their success. So that's where you start, and then of course you try and shortlist and try and make a specific pitch and an elevator pitch and so on and so forth. But that is where the whole thing starts.
Maybe Ashish, you can tell them about the compact that you're trying to put together for funders. I mean,
Yes. Yeah. So something that we are working at the UN level, there's a small roadblock, but we're still working on, is trying to put together partners that are interested in funding young people and the activities of young people in the context of advocacy and activism. So that's something we're trying to put together with the UN and with other young people. So from our side, things are all right. We have to wait for certain clearances and stuff from the UN. So essentially, also what that does is, it does not guarantee a stream of resources and sponsorships, but it makes it a lot easier for people to access pools of resources, and at least they know where to go and who to speak to, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
But also with certain principles, like, because you weren't able to discuss meaningful youth engagement. I think they have to hear it.
Of course, yeah. Certainly, and the whole idea of the compact is also that it will be based on what we call the principles and barriers of meaningful youth engagement. So the principles, as we define in the context of youth engagement, principle one is self-organized, where young people themselves determine their priorities, their governance structures, and so on. So the parties they're engaging with and the parties that are contributing to them have no say in in identifying the priorities young people have, and identifying the structures through which young people organize themselves. The other one is legally mandated. This is slightly contextually specific. So, for example, if a multilateral body, or if a government, or if an agency is engaging young people, they need to do so through a mechanism that has a dedicated space for young people, as opposed to on a random basis go out into the market and say, hey, young people, come here, we want to talk to you about some particular topic. So there needs to be a dedicated space. The next principle is, we talk about being well-resourced. I think everybody understands what resourcing well the engagement of young people means. And then we have the principle of, designated and legally mandated go hand in hand. So not only does the place need, the space for young people needs to be a designated space, but it also needs to be mandated as part of the process. Otherwise, they're at the whim of the person that seeks to engage, as opposed to seeks to not. And the last one is accountable. So the mechanism through which young people are engaging needs to have somewhat of a feedback loop and accountability mechanism towards other young people and their community, the community in the name of which they're engaging. So yeah, these are the principles. And then barriers, of course.
Oh yeah, please.
individualization is the primary barrier. There is this fashionable trend that sometimes agencies like to engage a particular young persons, claiming that, oh, they're the representative of the youth voice and this and that. So that is something that we very, very seriously uh, discourage against. And then the other barriers are just lack of resources, and so it's the inverse of the principles.
I think what Ashish is saying to add is quite important, because as young people, like, we really need more resources when we try to organize ourselves, but also we have to be careful to not to like be like I'm saying, it's that tension to like not forget our principles, because we're, after all, we're not just youth, we're part of a generation. So if we start as early as now in like breaking the silos and the barriers of meaningful civil society engagement, hopefully our generation will be able to emulate that, even when we're already in the decision-making spaces. We're the new, I don't know, whatever, like whatever we are in 10 years. But like, that's been a problem. A few organizations, like, you take a grant from, say, I don't know, I'm sorry, but like, take a grant from, say, the US, or like USAID, or like some, I don't know, some aid giving Western country, and then we don't realize the geopolitical implications of like why, to begin with, Western countries give aid to Southeast Asia. Like, it's all part of a political agenda. So we have to be careful that, and if our advocacies are not aligned with that, then that becomes, it's not helpful for the advocacy. So I mean, it's a struggle to like find the right partners, and then also at the same time not be poor activists, and to find a sustainable way of keeping everything together. But I hope that compact coalition that Ashish is putting together will be helpful. Also, I don't know how you feel about social entrepreneurship, but it's something that we've started to consider, just because we're able to control more our resources if we fundraise on our own, or if we try to develop some ethical way, like, of doing social business. Then we're able to control our own, like, we're not in the we're not under the helm of a funder or a donor. But then, of course, it also reinforces neoliberalism. So there are pros and cons. At the end of the day, like, it's really up to you to know where you draw the line.
Yeah, thank you. And the second question, and I think we will wrap it up, is any advice for freshmen in advocacy field, and how can we recover from failure if we fail any project about advocacy at first start, at the beginning? How can we recover? How can we motivate ourselves again?
How can we motivate ourselves when we fail? How can we recover from failure? Ashish, you've been here longer, so I guess you've observed more failures.
No, I think that's a good question. And again, I think my answer will, I'm not sure if it will satisfy people or not. I think very often we have to contemplate and define what we mean by failure. And very often, actually, most of our successes are not always seen in the terms of the exact outcome that we want to see on paper, right? I mean, sometimes it's a change in attitudes that we bring about. Sometimes it's just the process of going through what we have gone through. Sometimes it's also measured in the actors we have been able to convene. So one thing is, I think while I'm saying that we have to be, I wouldn't use the word flexible, we have to be more open about a concept of success and failure, but we also have to not be careless and be like, oh yeah, we can never measure our success anyway, so how does it matter? So I'm not advocating for that, but what I'm advocating is, this room seems like a set of motivated and committed people. And very often motivated and committed people are very hard on themselves in terms of what they deem as a success and what they deem as a failure. So, all I would say is that it will be good to broaden the scope and horizon of what we term as success and what we term as failure, because very often it's not only packaged in the way that we want to see it. So there are a number of markers, and you have to see how all of those markers are moving, including your own attitude and approach towards things as one of the markers.
Great.
So I think we can take a virtual group photo, so we can keep it a memory. So my colleagues will take a photo. So okay, so everyone, if you feel confident, you feel comfortable.
Your video, it shows my name. Turn on your video.
It could be a memory. Oh, Asis, can you turn on your camera? Lovely. And everyone, if you feel confident, if you feel comfortable, you can turn on the camera. So I will ask my colleagues to take a photo, so we have memory.
What's up with your hair, Ashish?
Oh, someone wearing face mask. Okay, is this done? Oh, good, nice. And I think we still have 5 minutes left. So I think someone asked a question about how we can measure the monitoring and accountability of the organization. I will copy paste the question here. So if we can answer it, it would be helpful for this participant. Yeah.
How can we do monitoring and evaluation? I think I think Ashish will have a more technical answer to this, but my approach will be more towards breaking the silos. Like, that's why we can't, as advocates, that's one of the reasons why we can't kind of live in our own shells. So that's why I engage institutions. So all my projects, from the Asean Youth Disaster Risk Reduction and now Asian Youth Peace Network, I try to tie them to the institutions, the National Youth Councils, and maybe ministries that are relevant to the, I try to avoid the private sector. So because, we have to we hold our governments accountable. So that's why I try to look at government allies, and then also, of course, if they're relevant, like UN agencies, because they will be able to help in making sure that the initiative or the policy change that you're trying to put forward is institutionalized. So my answer is more on institutionalization, but internally, like, what do you think about M&E? Because that's on your slide, Ashish, monitoring and evaluation.
Yeah, of course. So I mentioned it also because, this question also comes up a lot, and the answer, like a lot of things, is quite paradoxical. So monitoring, ideally monitoring should be an apolitical process, but the fact that we are trying to make something apolitical automatically makes it more political in itself. Having said that, I think the key factors of monitoring, are, there are many factors, but the two key factors of monitoring that we like to think about and talk about are, so one is that it needs to be a technically sound process. And I think that's quite self-explanatory what technically sound means, but the process and the framework through which policies and other frameworks are monitored needs to be very, very sound, needs to be evidence informed. Having said that, no process of monitoring will ever be able to be as sound as it needs to be, because there are always new methodologies and tools, and there's always more information. and data we can take into account. But having said that, any framework and process of monitoring will also be suboptimal if it does not include the community, which is supposed to be the beneficiary of the policies. So not only does the process has to be apolitical and technically sound, it also has to include in a fundamental manner the communities which the policies that we're monitoring are supposed to serve. So I just like to add these 2 points.
Okay, so I think it's good for today. And last sentence, I want to say thank you to our speaker today, and I'm also appreciate the question and the participants. So and I think I will leave the stage to so that you can come back to the main room to move on the tea talk, and hopefully you will enjoy it also. Thank you all. Or you can wait here until more than 1 minute left.
Thanks, Duke, for moderating.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, both speaker.
Thanks. All right.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye.